Hello, this is Mrs. Ross, and this is Module C, Unit 2, Lesson 1, Parts of an Ecosystem Notes. So let's get started. We're on page 70 of the book, so let me go ahead and move this down. That's 68, 69, this is 70. I'm going to see if I can highlight. So, definition of an ecosystem is all the organisms that live together in a particular space along with their non-living environment. So that's going to go there. And then we have our first quick check. So let's slide on over. It says, which of the following is an example of an ecosystem? An oyster, a school of fish, fish and sharks, or the open ocean? And that's going to be the open ocean. And then the next question is, a student wants to investigate a biome. What characteristics should the student use to identify an ecosystem? So, the student should describe the climate conditions and plant populations that live within the biome. The student should identify the climate conditions and the plant populations that live within the biome. Let's see over here. It says, explain how ecosystems and communities are related. A biome covers a large area that may contain several ecosystems. An ecosystem consists of a community of several species in their abiotic environment. Again, the answer to this question, explain how ecosystems and communities are related. A biome covers a large area that may contain several ecosystems. An ecosystem consists of a community of several species and their abiotic environment. Okay, so let's go back this way. And we're on page 72. So let's go ahead and go to page 72. Let's see, that's 71. This is 72. So we're here at the top. I don't think you can see my cursor and it won't let me mark on the screen. So that's lovely. Biotic factors, the definition of biotic factors are the parts of an ecosystem that are living or that result from the activities of living things. The parts of an ecosystem that are living or that result from the activities of living things. And then it says examples of biotic factors in a dragonfly's ecosystem. So let's see. Biotic factors in a dragonfly's ecosystem include tadpoles, green algae, and insects that the dragonflies eat. Biotic factors in the dragonfly's ecosystem include tadpoles, green algae, and insects that the dragonfly eats. So that's those three items there. Oops, went too far. So we did that. So we're at abiotic factors, which is in the non-living environment. An abiotic factor is a non-living part of an ecosystem. A non-living part of an ecosystem. And some examples of abiotic factors are air, nutrients, soil, sunlight, water, wind, and temperature. Some examples of abiotic factors are air, nutrients, soil, sunlight, water, wind, and temperature. And then we have our next quick check. Which of these is an example of a biotic factor that could affect the size of a population? Climate, disease, a natural disaster, or water availability. The answer is B, disease. And then which of these is an example of a biotic factor that could limit a community in an ecosystem? Where do I have that one? Which of these is an example of a biotic factor that... Oh, there it is. Sorry. A biotic factor that could limit the community and ecosystem, and the answer is B, new predators move into the ecosystem. That's a biotic factor. And then here we have a chart right there. The table shows data about abiotic factors in two different watersheds. So a watershed is the land that the water drains off to go into like a lake or stream or a pond. What are two other abiotic factors that could be studied, abiotic, to help determine the health of the streams in the two watersheds? So aquatic insects are biotic, so that's out. Phytoplankton are also biotic, that's out. Light penetration and water flow, neither of those is biotic. And macroinvertebrates are biotic. So the only answer that makes sense is C. And now we're on to back to our notes. How can ecosystems be described? So we're on page 72. We need to get to 73, which is here, I think. right here. So not in the first paragraph, but in the second paragraph, it says, ecosystems can be described according to their levels of organization. Ecosystems can be described according to their levels of organization. And the smallest level of an ecosystem is on 74, so let's go that direction. Levels of organizations in an ecosystem. The smallest level is a single organism. The smallest level is a single organism. And then the next question is the largest level. Largest, where did it go? Right there. Largest level of the ecosystem. Let's see, the largest level is the entire ecosystem. The largest level is the entire ecosystem. And this is in the first paragraph on page 74, I believe. And then we have our next quick check. It says a diagram shows a food web in a forest. Which of these is represented by the diagram? So the diagram is over here, all of these items. Is it abiotic factors, community, ecosystem, or population? And the answer is B, community. And then we have how can biotic and abiotic factors affect the size of a population? Give an example of a biotic factor, or of a biotic and an abiotic factor that could affect the population of snakes living in a prairie. Okay. So there's three different parts actually to this, and I'm going to go ahead and say them. Organisms in a population require certain resources in order to survive and flourish. If those resources are limited, these organisms die. So organisms in a population require certain resources in order to survive and flourish. If those resources are limited, those organisms may die. So then an example, that's the answer to the first question. And then it says, give an example of a biotic and an abiotic factor. Examples of biotic factors that could affect a population include food and disease. So biotic factors that could affect a population include food and disease. Examples of abiotic factors that could affect a population are water, light, and weather. Abiotic factors that could affect a population include water, light, and weather. Okay, so now we're on to 4 levels of an ecosystem. This is on page 75, and these are the titles. So it's going to be individual, population, community, and ecosystem. Those are the 4 levels: individual, population, community, and ecosystem. And then we're going to define it. So species, let's see if we can find species. Species is right here at the top under the individual. It says a species includes organisms that are of the same kind and can successfully reproduce, resulting in fertile offspring. A species includes organisms that are of the same kind and can successfully reproduce, resulting in fertile offspring. That's your definition of species. Population. Oops. So we did species, we're on to population, which is in the second paragraph here. A population is a group of individuals of the same species that live in the same place at the same time. A population is a group of individuals of the same species that live in the same place at the same time. Okay, and then I have a question. What do individuals within a population compete for? The next sentence says individuals within a population often compete with each other for resources. And it gives an example. Individuals within a population often compete with one another for resources. Okay, so let's, come on, there we go. So we did that, and now we're down to community. So let's pull this up to community. The definition of community is that it's made up of all the populations of different species that live and interact in an area. A community is made up of all the populations of different species that live and interact in an area. So how does a community depend on each other? The species in a community depend on each other for many things such as shelter and food. The species in a community depend on each other for many things such as shelter and food. So we're on to the next page. Oops. That's the first page. So we're on to the next page where it says who competes within a community. Populations in a community compete. Populations within a community compete with other populations. Okay, and we know population is a level of the ecosystem up here. Okay, how does energy flow through an ecosystem? So now we're still on 75. So energy flows through an ecosystem starting with sunlight that powers plant and algae growth. So that's step 1. starting with sunlight that powers plant and algae growth. Energy continues to flow through the ecosystem as one organism eats another. So those 2 steps to how does energy flow through an ecosystem. It starts with sunlight that powers plant and algae growth and continues to flow through the ecosystem as one organism consumes, eats another. So then we have our quick check. And on the quick check, the first question is, which example represents an abiotic or non-living factor in an aquatic ecosystem? So water lilies are living, bass are living. The pH, which is the acidity level of a lake, is decreased. That's not living. Dragonflies are living. So the answer is C. And then we have our next. Why does it do that? I don't know where I left. I did that one. I think we did that one. I don't know why it does this every time. Okay. Which of the following is an example of a population in a desert ecosystem? There's the saguaro cactus. Those are your cactuses that look like they have arms. The amount of rainfall, that's abiotic. A fennec fox and its young. Hawks and lizards they feed on. So the answer is A, the saguaro cactus. And then we need to fast forward to 79. So we're on page 75, 76, 77, 78. Here's 79 where it talks about a wildlife ecologist. So what happened with the Burmese pythons in Florida? Let's check here. Okay, so these pythons were illegally brought to Florida as pets decades ago, and some of them escaped or were released into the environment. Now their population has expanded greatly as the snakes eat just about any animal small enough to swallow. So these Burmese pythons were originally pets that either escaped or were released, and now the population has kind of exploded, okay? What are the effects of the introduction of a species from one ecosystem to a completely different one? Let's 2 possible results. Okay, so one of the results, number 1, the organism may not have the biotic or abiotic factors it needs in order to survive. So if an organism is introduced to an ecosystem that's completely different than what it's used to, it may not have the biotic or abiotic factors it needs to survive, number 1. Number 2, the organism may not have any predators and may begin to threaten the native populations of the ecosystems. So when we introduce this, number 2 is that this organism may not have any predators and may begin to threaten the native populations. And I think that's it for our notes. Let me know if you have any questions.